Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, wonderful audience members. We are so excited to welcome you to Ignite Fair's 2021 Canadian University panel. My name is Maggie Liu.
And my name is Serena Chang. We are your MCs for today. For those of you who aren't familiar with Ignite Fair, we are a subdivision of a nonprofit called Pledges for Change. Our mission is to inspire youth in the GTA to take action in their communities through volunteerism and leadership.
For the past few months, our team at Ignite Fair has been working diligently to plan and bring our annual university panel to life. And we are beyond excited to have you all here with us today. During today's panel, we will spend the first hour in the main room where Serena and I will pose questions to our panelists. And then from 3 to 4 p.m., all of you will have the opportunity to hop into breakout rooms and ask your burning questions through one-on-one or group discussions.
Of course, we recognize that applying to Canadian universities can be a daunting process. We know that the transition to post-secondary education can be really overwhelming, from the application processes to preparing in high school through academic requirements. So that's why we're here to help. We hope that our panelists can give you a clearer picture of your future academic career at different universities and their application processes.
So before we kick off with our introductions, we do want to give you a quick overview of today's presentation. We'll be delving into 4 main subtopics, which are choosing a university or program, advice and tips, the application, and finally, financial aid and scholarships. Please note that during the call, we've set a permission so that you can only message the members of Ignite Fair who are with us today. Throughout the first hour, you are strongly encouraged to ask questions, but however, if we can't get to your questions, then you will have the chance to pose them later in our breakout rooms at 3 p.m. Without further ado, let's have our panelists introduce themselves. Sana, would you like to start us off?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Sana, and I'm an incoming student at Western University, and I will be studying health sciences, and I currently have AEO status into the Ivy Business program.
Hi everyone, my name is Maryam. I'm a second-year computer science student at the University of Waterloo and also an incoming software developer at RBC in the fall. So yeah, feel free to ask me questions about co-op, school, my program, anything you like.
Hi everyone, my name is Megan. I'm currently going into 3rd year at Ryerson for biomedical engineering.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah. I'm a University of Waterloo alum as of this April, and then I'm starting my 1st year at the Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College next week.
Hi everyone, my name is Annie. I'm starting my 2nd year at McMaster University in the Health Sciences program.
Thank you so much, panelists. We also have 15 more wonderful panelists who will be joining us for the next hour during our breakout rooms. So for all of our attendees, don't fret as you will meet them soon.
Okay, let's jump right into our questions, beginning with the first subtopic, choosing a university or program.
Let's start off with something that I know is a very commonly asked question for sure. Many students often get overwhelmed by the sheer number of schools to choose from. So why did each of you choose your school and area of study? As well, if this is applicable, why did you choose to stay in Canada and not go abroad?
Ooh, so I can answer that first. So I'm not sure if you guys know, but I remember in grade 11 and even at the beginning of grade 12, when I heard someone was going to Western, I was like, oh, they're going to a party school. Like, I don't want to go there. And that's actually one of the reasons why at the beginning, I didn't want to go to Western. But the more I learned about it, and especially their programs like Ivy and their business school and the prestige of it, the more I was welcomed and like warmed to that idea. So although I didn't want it at first, it kind of like grew on me like a small underdog. Because at the beginning, I was choosing between UBC, McGill, and Western for those programs. So if you have questions about that, let me know. But yeah, the reason why I ultimately chose Western is because, one, I really like the type of people that are there and the campus. I think you really understand that once you visit the campus and you're like, ooh, this is right for me. It's kind of like a feeling. But generally, I liked how at the first 2 years I can do whatever I wanted because I'm really indecisive and couldn't pick between science and business. And so in the 2x2 program, where the first 2 years you can do whatever and the latter half of your 4-year study, you can do business. I thought that was best fit for me in my indecisiveness. And as for why I chose to stay in Canada, I did actually contemplate going abroad, especially because last year they waived the SAT requirements for applying in America, but I didn't for, I think, 2 primary reasons. The first one was that studying abroad is extremely expensive, and that was just not it for me. And I think the second reason is because I thought Canadian universities are really reputable as well. And I just like Canada more than America. So because of that, I didn't even apply to US schools.
Yeah, if I could tack on after that, I was very similar to Santa in the sense that I was kind of indecisive. I was juggling between going into med or like a science related program or going into business. Personally, I found that I wanted to focus on one. I was sort of leaning a little bit more towards med at that time, just because I had more hands-on experience with med. And so I decided to focus on med, hence why I'm in health sci right now, and then explore business in terms of electives, internships, sort of like extracurricular aspects of it. And then, yeah, I mean, health sci is also like a great program. I think contrary to a lot of other quote unquote like science or pre-med programs that are out there, we have a really small cohort. Everyone always talks about, the health sci family, the wolf pack, and just sort of having that really close-knit community was also really appealing for me. In terms of staying in Canada, I kind of really like being close to home. McMaster is in a really good spot where it's around an hour and a half away from where I live. So it's far enough that my parents aren't going to bother me every single weekend, but it's close enough that, if I want to come home and, just see my family for a little bit, I can definitely do that without, having to book a plane ticket. So I really like that sort of best of both worlds. And then I still do want that fresh start of going abroad and, going to a new country or a new place. And so I'm planning to supplement that later on with a study abroad, either in my 3rd or 4th year. So sort of having a little bit of both there.
I can kind of tackle my situation next. So for me, I was kind of always a science kid. Like I knew that I didn't enjoy business with the same passion as I did science, but I hated with a passion the pure versions of chemistry, physics, and biology. I was good at them, but I took exercise science in which is now considered kinesiology. Now I think they changed the coding now. But when I took kin, I fell in love with the fact that I would take science and basically apply it to the human body. And so for me, it was really just like realizing where my passions laid. But the other thing is too with business is I found that it's very easy to convert a science degree into business because you have the analytical skills and you talk to people all the time. So your soft skills are really developed. So, in the event that I did want to make the switch, I could. I don't know very many business students that have made the switch to science because they just don't have the depth of knowledge. The reason why I stayed in Canada, honestly, one, it's really expensive to go abroad, and I didn't really know what it would be like to be on my own to begin with. So I'm a December baby. So when I went into university, I was actually 17. So that's really small in my opinion. So being super far away from home kind of worried me because I was like, well, what happens if I need someone to come pick me up or I'm in trouble or I need help. So Waterloo's a great distance away. It's close enough that, if you're even if you're stuck in traffic, it's like maximum an hour and 45 minutes away from where I live. But all of the Ontario schools, to be honest, are not that far from anyone that lives like GTA wise. So it was close enough, but far enough for me to have the autonomy that I wanted as well. And I found that Waterloo, after touring campus between Western and Waterloo, I just really liked how Waterloo was the campus was very small and quaint, and it was very distinct that you're on campus because all the buildings are there. There's only one road, and it really just encompasses the entire campus. So I didn't feel like I would get hit by a car crossing the street, if I went to U of P.
Yeah, so I actually chose to do engineering because I always love solving problems and figuring out why things work the way they do and how. But at the same time, I also loved sciences. So I loved biology, I loved chemistry, and I loved math, of course. So I thought engineering was the best fit. It kind of incorporated all of those interests of mine into one, which is why I chose the program. In terms of why I chose Ryerson, I was actually debating between UBC and Ryerson. UBC's tuition is actually cheaper than Ryerson, surprisingly. But the living costs and the trips home are really expensive. So that was also a factor as to why I want to stay local. I wanted to save up some money. And they both offered co-op. At the same time, though, UBC, if I were to do my schooling there, in order to practice in Ontario, I would have to take another exam, a law and ethics exam, in order to practice there. And I've always wanted to live in Toronto. So just kind of an extra step that's unnecessary if I were to go all the way there. Same thing as like choosing to go abroad. Like if I were to go to the States or anywhere else, like I would have to come back and take another exam in order to be accredited to practice in Ontario. And I wanted to be close to my friends, my family. So that's also why I chose Ryerson.
Yeah, for me, I always enjoyed my math and computer science courses in high school. I also really liked chem and physics. So I was debating between engineering and computer science, but I ended up going with CS because I feel like it's more flexible. At Waterloo, you can take a lot of electives, and that really appealed to me because I wanted to try different things still. And the reason why I chose Waterloo is, of course, the co-op program is really, really good. I think I have 6 co-op terms, so 4 months each, and you can do that at different places, different positions, because when I was entering university, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So the co-op program, hopefully through that, I can figure out what I like and what I don't like. But yeah, and also Waterloo has a really strong women in computer science community, which really appealed to me because the field is male dominated, but that community really appealed to me. And the reason why I chose to stay in Canada is because honestly, I never really considered going to America or abroad, and I'm really close to my family and my friends, so I decided to go to Waterloo because of that.
Yeah, choosing a school and a program of study can definitely be a really gruesome process, but that's some brilliant insight. The next question we have for you is, what is a typical day in a life as a student in your program, and how would you sort of describe the overall culture within your program?
Yeah, I can start this off. For me, the first year was all online, so there wasn't really a typical day in my life. Every day kind of looked different because classes were all asynchronous, which means I had to watch lectures on my own time and basically do everything on my own time because there wasn't like set times for lectures and all of that, but there was set times for tutorials, and I definitely recommend everyone should go to tutorials because they give huge hints on assignments at tutorials. So yeah, I had to create my own schedule, and every day kind of looked different, but I would try to get everything or something from every one of my classes done each day so that the assignment wouldn't be left the night before, because assignments do take a long time, especially for my math and CS courses. So start those early. And culture-wise, I actually really liked it, even though it was all online. We had a girls group chat, which I met a lot of my close friends through. So we had each other, and it wasn't toxic. We would help each other. We'd go to tutorials together. And we would study together on like Zoom calls. But yeah, I actually really like the culture here, and I met a lot of close friends.
I can go next. So I'll talk about Waterloo first. So for me, because I graduated as a Bachelor of Science, Waterloo is really good at making sure that your first and second years made sure that all of your mandatory classes to accomplish your degree were taken care of in my first and second year. So I didn't have an elective until third year. And so essentially they schedule your class. You have, 5 classes for, a span of 5 hours for each. So it'd be like an hour and a half, one class like twice a week or something. And so normally my program was really good about keeping your schedule concise so that you were only really on campus for a couple hours at a time. You'd go home and do whatever you needed to do. And then in my upper years for Waterloo, basically got to pick your electives, and you could assign your own schedule based on the number of sections of the class that they had. So I got really lucky and ended up never having a Friday class for the last 2 years of my life. So it really depends on, you know, the format of your school, because I know other schools, it's a free for all for picking your courses. So I never really had trouble with any of that. And like, with that being said, I still had a lot of time to socialize and study and have a good like work-life balance. So I really like that. Culture at Waterloo, for kin, it was really deceiving, because everyone's like, oh, you're in kin, you're such a jock. And everyone must be like super weird, or, you know, not know much about anything. Total opposite at Waterloo. Everyone is like so diverse, such like a great group of people. Everyone's super helpful, loves to talk and just, you know, hang out at Starbucks and like pick each other's brains. The only thing that I would say is like, obviously, most of the people in my program were trying to apply for post-grad programs. So the last year kind of got a little more competitive, because you're basically trying to compete for the same thing. But otherwise, everyone's like super nice, super like well knit, and gets along with a lot of people. For CMCC, can't really comment too much because it's a little bit different because everything's online. So, you know, I've met a couple people and they all seem really nice, and everyone's kind of in it to win it. So now that you've gotten in, people are just trying to stay in at this point. So I can probably comment on that later. If anyone has any questions, you guys feel free to email me about, you know, that kind of post-grad life situation.
All right, thank you so much for those new perspectives on uni life. I know that these next two questions are on a lot of students' minds. So for the first question, can you give us a very brief rundown of what types of extracurricular activities were you involved with in high school?
Yeah, so I can start off. So my main extracurricular activity, and probably my only extracurricular activity, was volleyball. Volleyball took up a lot of my time. I had practices, I had to commute to practices, and then we would go to tournaments and travel. And I also worked part-time. So it was really hard for me to join like school clubs or school teams. So I really only focused on volleyball. Volleyball, though, it developed huge teamwork skills. That is really important. Like, volleyball is obviously a team sport. You play with 5 other people on the court, and I'm a setter. So you have to communicate with your players, your hitters, figure out what they kind of like. And this kind of ties into engineering, because engineering, there's a lot of projects you work with, like with a team. And, you know, you have to work with a team to get things done more efficiently and effective. So that's like, teamwork really incorporates into that as well. Like, being a biomedical engineer, you need to understand how the body works in order to design like new technologies and new devices. And playing a sport, like, I understand that more hands-on and really well. And my goal is actually to design prosthetics for athletes, so they'll be able to perform better. And me being an athlete will just help my understanding grow and understand that a lot better. So.
Yeah, for me, my biggest extracurricular was being on the swim team for 4 years of high school. In the last 2 years, I was actually captain of swim team. So I led and organized events for 70 plus swimmers. So it's a huge team. I was also part of the athletic council at my school, Engineers Without Borders, and I also did robotics outside of school. And I also had 2 part-time jobs. My extracurriculars, I wouldn't say were too like computer science focused, like compared to my peers at Waterloo. A lot of them did only CS related extracurriculars, but for me, I feel like I did more of like athletics because I really enjoyed that, and I also did robotics outside of school, so I did a bit of both. And I think that's totally fine, because I do think that Waterloo looks for well-rounded students that don't only do CS and don't only code all day. But yeah, I think that robotics helped me learn a bit of like more of the tech side of like building robots and using Arduino and all of that, which I haven't used yet in university, but I do think that it helped me gain more skills in that. And also my non-CS related extracurriculars helped me build very important skills like time management skills, organization, and leadership, because I was leading a big group of people.
Yeah, so adding on to that, I was actually all over the place a little bit as well. Similar to Maryam, I was also part of the swim team for 4 years, captain for 2. I did DECA for 3 years. I did prefects for 2 years. I did a bunch of other stuff, but the one thing that all of these things, all of my commitments had in common were that they were long term. So I'd be doing them for years at a time. And even though these didn't really relate to like my end goal slash, the program that I'm in right now, it was really great for just developing those connections with, the people that you're doing it with. So like peers, the people who are supervising you, and then like allows you to also have more time to actually do meaningful work. So, contributing ideas to projects, actually seeing a project from beginning to end, so that you have sort of that tangible experience to take with you, either, in your applications or even beyond, right? When it's just useful to have, these soft skills and even some hard skills, like developing different, I guess, like techniques to do different things that you're interested in. So yeah, even though none of these were like med related, these were all interest-based commitments that I felt still helped me a lot in my post-secondary experiences. In terms of things that were related to med, I was part of a sick kid study, 2 sick kid studies actually, and I also worked at South Lake Hospital. And so I worked on idiopathic nephrotic syndrome and kidney transplants. And even though it wasn't something that I really fully understood as like a grade 10, grade 11 student, it was really interesting for me to actually be in the hospital environment or be in the research environment and see how things are sort of conducted around there, interacting with patients. That sort of sparked my, passion for med. And that's what I was talking about earlier in terms of having more hands-on experience with med. And I was like, hey, I really like this. This is something that I could, potentially see myself doing in the future, because actually, being in the hospital is way different than anything you would ever learn in biology class or chemistry class. And so I think, in my opinion, it's really important to get that like quote unquote real world experience. And so even, if med isn't one of your passions, I would say it's a good idea to just, get out there and explore something that's in the field that you're interested in.
Yep, those are some really great answers. And even though the extracurriculars that we do may not always relate to what we actually study, it's a really great place to get that experience. So now that we've been able to narrow down the schools and programs you're interested in, it's actually time to apply. So let's move on to the application process.
Since there is no real cookie cutter approach for applying to different universities, can each of you elaborate on the application process to your program?
I can start off. So my application process was really simple. I paid the $300 for 6 programs on OUAC. I didn't have to do any supplementary applications, didn't have to write an essay. I just waited for my acceptance. That was it.
I'll make this really short because I think there's another question on it later on, but for the MAC-LSI application, it's 3 questions, 1,500 characters maximum. For the first and second questions, you get a choice. So there's like 1A, 1B, and then you choose one of them to answer. And then the third question is a problem-solving question. Strongly recommend writing it out beforehand, because the actual submission platform that you write it in will not let you copy and paste. So either like have it printed out beside you so you can copy it, or like on another laptop so that you can just write it in and then you click submit and then don't think about it until May.
Yeah, for Waterloo, very similar. We had an application process, which was called AIF, Admission Information Form, where there was around 3 or 4 questions for CS. I had a bit more because I also applied to engineering, so there was like 3 more that I had to write. I think the biggest challenge was the character limit, because I think it's like 600 to 900 characters, which is very, very small. So keep your responses short, concise, get to the point. Yeah, that's it.
For Waterloo, for me, it was really simple. I somehow picked programs that only really cared about my grades to start. So I just did what Megan did, and I submitted all my stuff through OUAC, and I paid the nice fine to decide that I wanted to pursue university. But for CMCC, it was a little different because they're like their own private school. You have to apply to the school themselves, and they do their own application process. So they wanted to have my resume, my like official transcripts, which is essentially my grades. And then based on that, you would move on to the next round, which is a series of like online interview questions to kind of get the gist of who you are as a person and how you think. And that's graded by a couple of people, but I think I can elaborate on that later because there's a slide on it. But otherwise, like it was very simple and clean cut.
Yeah, adding on, I will talk about this later on, but to be very brief, I just applied on OUAC to apply to Western, and then for the advanced entry, I just had to apply separately through the Western's HBA program website.
Yep, that's really great. It's nice how they keep it pretty simple, just a couple of paragraphs on questions. So for a lot of students, there might be an interview, and that is often the hardest part of the application. So if you went through an interview for applying to your universities, for undergraduate or graduate school, can you describe what that looked like for you? And what are some do's or don'ts that you faced?
I can speak briefly in terms of the undergraduate part. Even though health sci itself doesn't require an interview, I did apply for a lot of other programs. I was accepted into biomedical engineering at McMaster and also Rotman Commerce, which both required interviews. And so in doing those two interviews, here are some, I guess, a few tips that I took away from my experience. I think first off, what's really important is to familiarize yourself with the interview platform. I'm pretty sure not all the schools will use the same ones. I think it was called like Krita or maybe something along those lines, but almost every school uses their own specific platform. So it'll be really nice to just, get on there, do a few practice runs, make sure you know what buttons to click, what it looks like when the timer runs out, how to view how much time you have left and all that fun stuff. Personally, when I did my interviews, because it wasn't a live interview, it was just like a sort of automated, like, you're going to be recorded in 3, 2, 1, talk. There wasn't a person on the other side, so I had a cheat sheet beside me. Just on like a piece of paper, I wrote down, some of my commitments that I thought would be relevant, leadership positions, important skills, and just answers to your typical like questions that you would normally hear in interviews, like what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, name a time where you collaborated in a group. And I just wrote the answers to that just so it would give me a head start when, I saw the actual question in case they were somehow related. And then when I saw the actual question, I also had a blank piece of paper with me so that I could prep my notes. So I think normally they'll give you like a minute or 30 seconds to just like write down some thoughts after they show you the question. And so in that time, I write down some jot notes that I wanted to say, making sure that I would hit all the important points I wanted to cover. And then I just practice. So practice makes perfect, be it like in front of, your parents, stuffed animal, dog, friend, sister, brother, anything like that. I found it was really useful to record myself. So like having a camera, I hate hearing my voice on recording, but it's nice to sort of play it back and see, where you could improve or like, some things that you have to change. And then in terms of don'ts, don't give up. Sometimes you'll stutter. It's sort of inevitable, but if you need to take some time to like recollect your thoughts, 3 seconds feels a lot longer in an interview than it actually is. So just take some time to think, because in my opinion, it's better to sort of take that moment of silence and keep going after you've recollected yourself, instead of sort of stumbling over your words like I am right now. And then don't let your eyes wander. So because it is going to be online, staring at your screen versus staring at your webcam will look very different. And so personally for me, I took like a little bright sticky note and I stuck it right beside my webcam, so I need to look there instead of the screen. And yeah, those are my tips for the undergrad part, at least.
Thank you kindly for those insightful answers. And now we will move on to general advice and tips from our university students. So imagine time travel is possible. If you were to go through the undergraduate process again, what would you do differently?
I can start. So for me, I'm an overthinker just by nature. I didn't really realize this until someone told me like 2 years ago. They're like, your mind doesn't stop. You're an overthinker. And I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense now. Honestly, don't stress as much as you think you need to. Like once you submit your application, you just kind of live your life. Don't worry about it. Like it's you worrying about it 10 times a day is not going to make the person on the other end of the school review it any faster. There's like hundreds of people that they have to look at, and they themselves at the school have their own timeline. So they're not going to hit anything until literally they say, oh, acceptances come out in April. Like don't expect much communication before then. So just kind of do what you need to do, and live your life, do what you can. And then I think the other thing that I would say is I probably would have limited the schools I applied to in terms of not as many. I was strategic in the fact that I applied to a range of schools. Like I knew I could get into 2 programs. There was one that I really wanted to get into, and then there was a school that I was like, okay, if I didn't get into Waterloo, I'd be really okay going here. But at the end of the day, the more applications you apply to, the more work it is and more stress it is. So like if you can somehow narrow down the number of schools, whatever makes you comfortable, right? Like some people I know only applied to 3, and I was like, 3's too little. That makes me too worried. But finding that happy number and just kind of sticking with your gut and being confident in yourself would kind of be the way I would go.
Sorry, yeah, just to quickly echo Sarah's point. I think I agree personally with her last point. I think if I were to redo it, I might apply for less schools. I applied to a lot of schools just in case, even though I was almost 100% sure that I didn't want to go to that program or didn't want to go to that school. So that was lots of money for the OUAC fee and time if there was a sub app. So I feel like if I were to redo it again, I just apply for the ones that I actually like, making every app count, essentially.
That is great. I know it's stressful time, so sometimes you may not do everything that you wanted to do, but it all works out. So as well, is there anything you wish you've done differently in high school that would have made your university experience better or easier?
Yeah, I'll start this off. I feel like if I could go back, I wish that I went to more hackathons. I never went to hackathon in high school, and I really regret not going to them because I feel like you'll learn so much and in such a short period of time, and it really opened a lot of doors for me after going to them. So I wish I started earlier. I also wish that I joined more clubs in high school I avoided joining some clubs because they were highly male dominated, like the robotics club at my school and also the CS club at my school. So I wish if I went back, I would definitely have joined them. And also my third thing that I would have done differently is don't join clubs just to boost your university application, because a lot of times you don't even end up writing about those clubs because you didn't do much. So yeah, if I could go back, I'd probably only do the clubs that I was really interested in and had lots of passion for.
I can go next. I think the biggest thing for me after going through my entirety of my undergrad, I honestly would have tried a lot of things in high school just to get out there to figure out what I like and don't like. I honestly would not have been so afraid to fail in high school because at the end of the day, it's one grade, it's one mark. Whereas when I got to university, I like panicked when I thought I failed an exam, but at the end, like if I failed it, everyone failed it. So I honestly just would have, gotten out more, seen more friends, not, studied the extra 10 minutes for a test, because if I didn't know it 10 minutes before the test, I'm not going to know it at the test. So really just like figuring out who, like my best way to study as well, would have made my life a lot easier in university.
Yeah, something I would have done differently is I would have watched a lot more YouTube videos. I think there's so much educational and really worthwhile content that you can watch on YouTube just to help with your application process. And just like a shameless plug here, like I also, like, for example, made some YouTube videos of like the difference between like life science and health science and med sci, just because like I feel like it's genuinely helpful. And you can find so much great content on YouTube to like help you understand the difference, because when you're applying at first, it's like so hard to understand even like the minute differences. Then that's really important. So yeah, that's something I would have done differently.
Yep, those are all really great points, and we can definitely learn from that as high school students. So next, one of the biggest factors that students must consider is how they're going to finance their post-secondary education.
Can our wonderful panelists please provide some insight on how you're financing your education?
I can go first. One of the main ways that I'm actually financing my education is through OSAP, which is specifically for Ontario. And OSAP is great because they actually give you grants as well as loans. So let me just be very clear on what the difference is. Grants is giving you free money. So the government will give you a partial sum of free money along with loans, and loans are money that you have to pay back. So I think no matter what your financial situation is, apply for OSAP because you will probably get some amount of free money, which is grants. And then you can reject the loans later on if you don't want it. So that's my main source of how I'm actually financing my education. But along with that, I think you should always be saving money wherever you can for uni. And I think Sarah will touch on this later. And lastly, it's scholarships. And then there's scholarships that you can apply to yourself, but also entrance scholarships. And that just comes with having higher grades.
I can kind of supplement Santa's response. So for me, I didn't know if I would qualify for OSAP. Everyone that I talked to, my guidance counselors were like, no, you won't qualify. And I didn't know that there was a grant option. So I really regret listening to them on that half because there's a lot of information out there on financing that no one tells you about until you pick it apart. But for me, I'm financing it myself. And a lot of the reason why I went to co-op at Waterloo was to actually pay for tuition because what I would make in my semesters working actually covered all of tuition. So I only really had to worry about my living expenses and paying rent and, you know, buying food for money. And then also just like make sure that you use the financial aid website of the school that you're applying to. A lot of the times they actually post the anticipated tuition amount from the year before to give the incoming students an idea of how much money that you're going to be anticipated needing and honestly save your money. I started like in the second year when I actually had to start paying for things, I equated everything to a foot-long sub. So, you know, foot-long's $5. So I'd be like, oh, do I really need a sweater? That's $50. That's 10 meals. So just switching the way that you think really helps and just save your money where you can.
All right. Are there any steps that students should take beforehand to ensure that they can cover the cost of schooling?
For me, I had to talk to my family a lot to make sure that I kind of knew what was going on and honestly how to pay for tuition. I'd never had paid a bill in my life through my bank account before having to go to university. So just making sure, like, if you guys are working, the easiest way for me, especially since you guys don't have a lot of costs in university that you might have to account for, I would split my paycheck from every job. I'd go like 60 into savings and, you know, the 40 into disposable income. So then if I needed to pull from my savings account, I could.
Yeah, also adding on beforehand, you should go to the school's website. There's usually a financial calculator and you can see how much you have to pay. So for example, before I applied to my school, I had to see like, what is the cost of Ivy? Like, will I be able to fund that? And how should I start now to fund that?
Yep, those are all really great tips that we can take in to make sure that we can actually finance our education. So a certain number of students choose to turn to scholarships for financial aid. And could you share any scholarships that you applied for and would recommend for students to explore?
So I can go. So I worked part-time from grade 10 to present, and I actually worked at Canadian Tire. And a scholarship, I actually applied for a scholarship through my workplace. It wasn't advertised very well. Like there was pamphlets at the front. It wasn't really popular. So I ended up looking at it, and the scholarship was basically answering one question, and that was how I can increase a customer's experience at the store. I ended up getting that scholarship. It was $1,000, but my dealer ended up matching it. So I got $2,000. It's not like a huge scholarship, but that's $2,000 I barely worked for. I wrote maybe 2 paragraphs on it. So I would really recommend if you work anywhere part-time. I know Costco, Home Depot, Canadian Tire, they offer scholarships. And many of my friends didn't even know about it. So the chances of you getting that scholarship is pretty high, and it's not much work.
Yeah, I used Scholartree. There's a bunch of like scholarships there for different like students, different types of scholarships as well. So I'll put the link in the chat if I can. But yeah.
Personally, I applied for a lot of those, like I call them lottery scholarships, like the ones that you see on My Blueprint, Student Life Network, like those kinds. And it is nothing short of a lottery because essentially it's like you don't have to do any work for it really. You just kind of like click a button to like enter. I think you put your email in or something, but you never know because I entered and I was just like, well, I might as well. And I ended up getting the My Blueprint scholarship, which was $1,000. And so I didn't expect that, but it was nice because I basically didn't have to do anything. So maybe even if like you can set aside just like one day to mass apply to all of these lottery ones and increase your chances. You never know what you can get.
All right, thank you so much for those resources. I personally never would have thought of some of those avenues. Now we will be moving on to the panelist podium section for some specialized expertise. So our first panelist to step onto the podium is Sana. Could you elaborate on the application process to obtain AEO status and what the status entails once you're in university?
Yeah, of course. So AEO, for those of you who don't know, is essentially advanced entry opportunity. And what it gives you is, I'm not sure if you guys have like IB programs. It's kind of like a pre-IB program. It's like getting you prepared for the main IB business program. But essentially what it is you apply earlier on and it more solidifies your place into having that business program and going into IB into your third year. So there's like a bunch of brochures and like I have like sample essays. If you guys want, you can probably email me or find me on LinkedIn for that. But essentially what it means to have AEO, it's again, you have advanced entry, but throughout the first 2 years, it's not like you're guaranteed into the program. You still have to maintain an overall average of 80%, and you have to keep like 2 extracurriculars and write about it. But I think that should be pretty simple. So yeah, that's essentially what it is. It entails you have a better opportunity to get into the IB HBA program.
Wow, I guess I just learned a lot about AEO. This next question is directed toward Annie, Miriam, and Megan. How would you describe the student culture of your program or school amidst COVID, and if it's applicable to you before COVID?
So I can start this one off. So MAC was unfortunately completely online except for nursing students, but for everyone in health side, we were all at home. So it was kind of, there were good sides and bad sides. During classes, there wasn't that much time to socialize because of course everyone's in class and it's a lecture and some of them were even asynchronous. So you didn't get to meet people that way. But I found that clubs were a really good place to meet people. We had a lot of like health sci specific clubs. Like personally, I joined the health sci musical, which was really fun. And not only do you sort of get to meet people, you also get to meet people with very like interests. So it's also like another, I guess, conversation starter, and it sort of helps the friendship along easier.
Yeah, I agree with Annie. Waterloo was also completely online, so I stayed home. I wasn't on Res. Res was open though, but I stayed home. There was no live classes, so all the classes, lectures were recorded. Tutorials were set at a certain time, which I definitely recommend that everyone goes because there's huge assignment hints. But like Annie mentioned, clubs were a great place where I met a lot of cool people and lots of close friends, especially WIX, which is Women in Computer Science. I mentioned that before. I joined that last term and I met a lot of cool people. Super helpful and supportive environment. And they had a lot of events for first years specifically to help them with like interview prep, resume critiques, and other events to meet women in the field.
Yeah, so same thing as Annie and Maryam. Ryerson was completely online as well, including labs. However, I did get a chance to do first semester and part of second semester, first year in person. Ryerson is a commuter school, so everyone commutes to Ryerson from different places, even like Hamilton. And the class sizes are pretty big first year. So it's kind of hard to make friends in like your regular classes. However, being in engineering, you have lots of labs. So labs are only class size of 20 people around there. So, and you get partnered up. So that's where I made most of my friends. But yeah.
Yep, COVID definitely isn't ideal, but it's important to make the most of it. So next, we are calling Annie up to the podium. Since the McMaster's Health Sciences program has a prestigious and competitive selection process, what was your brainstorming process like for the supplementary application questions?
Yeah, so like most people, I was very stumped at the beginning. They are very good at writing questions that are, meant to stump you. They're really open-ended, which is once again both good and bad. It's great because there are a lot of different things that you can write about, but on the other hand, it's very hard to find a starting direction. So in my brainstorming process, I ended up writing a bunch of drafts and outlines for different questions. Sometimes I draft multiple drafts for the same question. Sometimes it'd be for different versions of one question. So like I mentioned earlier, oftentimes there's 1A and 1B. So I do both of them. And then after sort of writing a bunch of drafts and outlines, I looked at all of them and I chose the ones that I thought would help me stand out the most. And so I guess addressing the second part of the question as well in terms of any tips, I think the biggest tip that I give people if they ask me is to take risks. And I know it seems really scary because especially on something that's as important as a university application, it's really easy to want to play it safe. But I think if any, the McMaster Health Sci application is a really great place to take a risk and write something that might not be as conventional. I know people who have used their 150 or 1,500 characters as to write a poem instead of just a paragraph. I've known people who have written stories. And so it's just to, I guess, use the word count as best as you can to sort of highlight your own skills and how you can stand out and how you can contribute to the program. But at the same time, I would say while thinking outside of the box and being creative, it's really important not to sacrifice clarity. So I had to rewrite my drafts so many different times to make sure that, it was easy, not only possible, but just easy to follow through my ideas from beginning to end, because, they're reading 5,000 applications in total. So out of all of those apps, you want to make it easy for them to follow your ideas. You don't want to make it hard for the person who's marking your app. And yeah, and I know there's breakout rooms after. So if there's any specific questions, I'm always open to answering them.
Those were some fantastic tips. This next question is for Maryam. Sometimes the stereotypical image of a CS student is a nerdy Asian male. To what extent did this notion that you don't necessarily belong in the field deter or propel you to pursue this program?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think I felt this notion of I don't belong more in high school because I was one of 4 girls in my CS classes. I avoided joining some clubs because they were all run by males and I was intimidated. But after coming to Waterloo, actually, I felt more like I belong because, like I mentioned before, WICS Women CS has helped me a lot with making me feel like I fit in. And also this didn't really deter me from pursuing this program because I had people around me that were very supportive. My dad's actually in the field, so he always helped me and motivated me to continue learning, and he always encouraged me to study in this field. So yeah, I didn't let this stereotype affect my decision. And going to Waterloo, I realized that this isn't like a huge problem because there's communities like WICS that will support you. But I know for a fact that Waterloo CS is 24% women. So it's still pretty low, but every year it's increasing, and hopefully by the time I graduate, it will be 50%.
That is really great to hear. You have a community in Waterloo that's really supportive. Once again, a question for Maryam. How did you first recognize your passion to study within a STEM field? And did you ever consider any other paths?
Yeah, this is a good question too. I always was really bad at English. Like I hated writing essays. I was also really bad at memorizing. So I was like, okay, health sciences, English, arts, that's out. That's not going to be an option. So that left me with engineering and CS. I always really liked math and my science courses. And I took my first ever CS course in grade 10. And we built a game, and from that game I was like, whoa, this is so cool. Like I can do so much with CS, and I can build websites, I can build apps, I can do so much within this field. So that's where I found like my passion. And like I mentioned before, my dad is a software engineer, so he always, like as a child, he would always show me what he was working on. He encouraged me to do robotics outside of school, and I found it all super cool. So yeah, that's how I found my passion, and I'm really glad that I did, and I'm very thankful for my dad as well.
That was really inspiring to hear. Here's a question for Megan. The title biomedical engineering intimidates many of us. Would you be able to define and elaborate on what your course material, lecture styles, assessments, and job prospects look like?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, it may sound intimidating, but you're just taking your knowledge of engineering and applying it to biology and medicine. The main goal of a biomedical engineer is you want to design and develop new medical devices to improve one's health and well-being. In terms of course material, all first-year engineers take the same courses, except for one course, which is an introductory to whatever discipline you're in. So mine was Introduction to Biomedical Engineering. I took Calc 1, Calc 2, Physics 1, Physics 2, Linear Algebra. I took a communications course, electric circuits, computer programming. Assessments, no essays, no presentations, except for one for communications. It's really just like midterm quizzes, final exam, and you're done, which is good for me because I honestly don't like doing presentations and writing stuff. Lecture styles, it's really just the prof teaches you off of a PowerPoint. You take down notes during it. Pretty much that's it in terms of lecture styles. It's usually like 2 to 3 hours with a couple breaks in between. But becoming a biomedical engineer, you can do so many things. Like I said earlier, I really want to design prosthetics for athletes. You can do designing and engineering of sports equipment, which is also really interesting to me because I love sports. And a job that's kind of relevant to today is simulation of modeling of diseases. So effectiveness of COVID-19 testing, that's really relevant to the biomedical engineering field. As you get further from like first year to fourth year, the courses become more discipline specific. So I go from like Calc 1, Calc 2, super theoretical, to fourth year where it's like tissue engineering, rehabilitation therapy, and stuff like that.
Yep, that really helps to clear up what the title biomedical engineering means. Now a question for Sarah. Why did you choose to attend chiropractic school, and how did your co-op experiences during undergrad affect this decision? To what extent do you feel like this was sort of your calling?
To be quite honest with you, I honestly did not know this was my calling until the day I got accepted. I knew that I always wanted to be in rehabilitation science because I just found it really interesting being an athlete and being injured from time to time. I always wanted to get back to my sport the fastest so I could continue to play. But the reason why I ended up going chiropractic over physiotherapy, which is another route that I was looking into, is one, at the end of the day, I'm a doctor. And two, I was talking to a bunch of my friends and getting perspective from a lot of people. And essentially, at the end of the day, they're like, so if you went to physiotherapy, you're going to convert your physiotherapy degree to basically be a chiropractor, but you don't want to go to chiropractic college. That's really dumb. So getting perspectives from other people and talking through my decision, the rationale of like the pros and cons and making a list really helped me decide between the two schools. In terms of how my co-op experience during undergrad affected my decision. The one thing I really loved about co-op at Waterloo is you could pick whatever the heck you wanted to do for the 4 months. I could technically apply to a job in Maryam's area in CS as long as I meet the requirements for the job. And so it was really great to be able to branch out and have different like placements in different locations. You can arrange your own job or you can go through Waterloo Works. I think we talk about a bit of that later. But essentially, it really was able to help me see what I wanted to possibly do and be able to see if I could picture myself doing that every day for the rest of my life. And like as of now, I think it's my calling. I'm really good at what I do, and I've had patients tell me that. So everything kind of worked itself out, but it was really just discovering who I was through university to be able to make the best fit for who I am and what I need.
I also hope to love my future major as much as you do. This next question is for Megan and Sarah. And given that you played competitive or rep volleyball for many years and throughout high school, why did you choose not to play at the varsity level? What factors did you consider that might have led to this final decision?
Yeah, so I can start off. I actually did want to play varsity. I've been playing volleyball since I was 11. However, my decision on which school I wanted to go to, it took me too long. And so I had to try out for the team. I didn't commit. And being a walk-on player, it's very hard to make the team as everyone else already committed before you and they've already looked at everyone. However, I did end up being a practice player for first year. However, the practices ended up being at the same time as my summative labs. So I would have to go. I would make a couple practices, but I decided that it wasn't the best for me. School is my number one priority. So I think that's a huge factor that led to my decision of just not playing varsity.
Just to kind of piggyback off what Megan said, so I started a little older than Megan. I started at 13 and I still play now. But for me, I could have played if I wanted to. I got my offer. I declined one because I was kind of scared. I didn't know what the workload would be from like university because obviously I've never gone. And I wanted to make sure that I was a student athlete and not an athlete student because I've had other people in different programs tell me like, oh, I have to miss like 4 classes every week because I have to go travel for teams. And I was not about to put myself in the position where I'd have to be trying to catch up continually for 4 years. That wasn't worth it in my opinion. But I also knew the other avenues that I could express my interests through volleyball at the school. So there's intramurals. I ended up being a student athletic therapist for the volleyball team. So I was still heavily involved in the sport. But I took another angle that was more applicable to what I wanted to do career-wise. And then now I coach. So I've just evolved my interest into something that fit with where I am in my life.
Wow, it's great to hear that you have made priorities and decisions based on what you feel is most suitable for you. One final question for Maryam and Sarah. One of the largest selling points of Waterloo is their co-op program. Can you elaborate on whether or not you think this has value compared to programs without co-op? And this can be in terms of benefits and drawbacks, how Waterloo has supported you in finding jobs, and any other factors that you see fit.
I can start. So I do think co-op is a great way to kind of explore what you need to know about yourself and figure out, you know, what disciplines are out there, because there are a lot of jobs on the market that you don't even know exist, but are avenues that you can take through your program. The one thing that I might have something different than Maryam to say is because Waterloo is known for NCS, math, AFM, which is accounting, finance, and management, their co-op placements for that half of the school are ridiculously amazing. Like people go to California and they work for Apple, they, you know, work for Deloitte and the big accounting firms. For health studies at Waterloo, there are really great opportunities. They're just so limited in number because the health profession doesn't like to give the opportunity to someone that isn't trained because you're liable for that person's life. That doesn't mean that you don't get the chance to experience what, you know, Maryam might do in CS. You just shadow more than actually doing things. But through shadowing, you actually get to ask a lot more questions and be a little more exploitative in the avenues that you can take. The drawback for me obviously was there were limited jobs, but when we like, it might have changed for Maryam, but when I was there wasn't a lot of informative support from the Tatum Center and the co-op department, just because they were just testing out their new avenue they were going to take. So I was the experimental year, and they experimented with us and they found the better solution. So I didn't know that you could go and do interview support or resume support or mock interviews. I didn't know that we had like in our co-op center, you have like post-grad specialty people that know everything about like med school applications, or, you know, how do you apply to specific jobs for working at a hospital. So the program has gotten a lot better, but for me, it kind of sucked because I was kind of in it by myself. And obviously when you're young, you haven't had the experience to interview and compete with students that are older than you, because the pool for jobs is not by faculty and by age of year. These are all the jobs that Waterloo has, and everybody and anybody can apply to it. So you just have, it's like basically like a real job market, right? So you really have to be able to, you know, levitate what you like, elevate what you have and use what you have. But I know Maryam will probably have a different experience than me, since, you know, the school really blesses her with her co-ops.
Yeah, to add on, I think Sarah mentioned a lot of great points. Yeah, for me, I think it was very eye-opening to add numbers. For CS, there was 2,000 jobs available to apply to, which is a lot, and I was only given 50 job applications first round. So through that, I was really able to go through the jobs and see what I like and what I want to do. Like I mentioned before, I have no clue what I want to do in my life. I knew that I liked CS, but I don't know what I specifically want to do. So I'm really hoping through co-op, I'll be able to see what I like and what I don't like. A lot of people say like co-op is to find what you don't want to do, because these jobs are only for 4 months. If you hate it, you're not stuck for life. And a lot of like benefits is that if you like the job and if they like you, you can get full-time offers. You can also get return offers, which is really nice. And Waterloo Co-op is a great way to expand your network, meet new people in the field, and get to know people in the tech field. Drawbacks are that it is 4 months. So every 4 months I have to go from school to co-op, school to co-op. And I really wanted to join the synchro team at Waterloo, but I don't think I can because I have to commit for 8 months, and I will be in Toronto in the fall. So that's a big drawback. And it's also stressful because you're applying every 4 months. You gotta go through that cycle all over again, a bunch of interviews, a bunch of going through your resume, and competition. Imposter syndrome is where this comes in, when you see your classmates getting cool co-ops, and the notion of Cali or bust is really, it can make a huge impact on you. And also one other thing is that it's hard to, I guess, find your group of people because everyone is either like, no one is on the same like schedule, I guess. But yeah, those are some benefits, drawbacks. Yeah.
Thank you so much, panelists, for your insight thus far. This actually brings us again to the end of our questions, and we will be opening up the breakout rooms shortly. If you need to be assigned to a room, just stay behind and let me know. So this is the slide with the different panelists and their areas of study. Feel free to take a screenshot for personal reference later. As well, please return to the main room after the breakout rooms close, as we will be announcing the $25 Cupcake Junkie gift card giveaway winner live. Happy learning.